Well, good evening, everyone. Michael Soothing here. I had a request to talk about videos or movies, and I think in an upcoming video I'll talk about movies we've seen recently on Netflix or Amazon, but I'm not prepared to do that this evening because I'm too lazy to make notes to myself on which ones we've watched and what I want to say about them. So instead, I went to my DVD collection. We don't watch DVDs very often. You know what? I'm going to talk about another one that Joanne has not seen. Hold on for one moment. Okay, I'm back. I wanted to talk mostly about classics, but I went and snagged a DVD collection of a mini-series that I'll discuss a little bit at the end, which is the famous classic story by John Steinbeck, East of Eden. You know, Steinbeck did all those great American novels that they force you to read when you're in high school. But some of them are very, very good. East of Eden is one of those stories, and it's set in, as many of his novels are, Carmel, Monterey area of California, which is where I lived for decades. All right, the Santa Cruz area, Monterey Bay area. This series, there's a famous movie called East of Eden with that guy who died young, who was the famous actor in it, that some of you will remind me his name. And this was a remake, but done very well. Has Jane Seymour as a evil temptress. I told you I was going to talk about it later. So instead, I'll do some ear-to-ear tapping here and talk about it at the end, because I'm going to talk about some classics. I have to have a sip of water first. Do you like that sound? I like water sounds. I think I mentioned to you before, I go to sleep most evenings. Well, really every evening. I sleep to the sound of a big, heavy waterfall that happens to be here in Oregon. All right. I'm going to talk about some movie classics that I thought were really worth watching and good. Classic films if you want to stretch back into the past and see something that has a good story, good acting, good characters, good direction, and good plot lines. If you hear my stomach growling from time to time, pay no mind. It's the medicine, it's the chemo they've been giving me in my stomach with a needle. They jabbed me yesterday with this big needle, ouch, and injected chemo into my... It's not a very fun procedure, but never mind all that. Before I start, let me show you a visual. Joanne made some nice cookies. She calls them cookies, but they actually taste a lot like gingerbread, and they look like gingerbread. I'll have a little bite of one, but she calls them peanut butter. I talked her into adding these little chocolate chips, but they're semi-sweet, so they're not sugary. That's quite good. But now I have to get a tissue. and make sure my hands are very clean. Let me do this ear to ear also, because I don't want to get fingerprints on my DVDs or the cases. I will eventually make an all sounds, no talking, ear to ear video, since I get that request from time to time, but not today. All right, To Kill a Mockingbird. This film is about the Deep South, back in a period of time. I read the novel also, famous novel, and it was back in the time when there was a serious level of racism. And it's a little misleading that they show these photos in color, because the film was filmed in black and white. I won't give you a bunch of spoilers, other than to say it's very excellently told, the story, a legal drama about a black man falsely accused of rape, and there's the girl that accused him, because she didn't want to admit that somebody else she'd been fooling around with or something. Anyway, oh no, she tried to seduce him, and he refused, and so she was angry and decided to get him charged, and her dad caught her. This is the widescreen edition. Did they colorize it? And so Gregory Peck is the lawyer defending him, and it's told through the eyes of his children, especially his daughter, Scout, who does a fantastic Oscar-winning performance herself. Anyway, it says here, To Kill a Mockingbird. Gregory Peck won an Oscar for his brilliant performance as a Southern lawyer. This film version of the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, the way in which it captures a time, a place, and a mood makes this film a masterpiece. I would say it is. Even the musical score fits it. The setting is a dusty southern town during the Depression. It goes on to describe some things. I don't know if it has special features inside. I'm going to open it and see. That big snap is going to be annoying. On my video, I have to try to find it and take it off in post-production editing. But what I like about DVDs versus streaming videos and things is that you get a more tactile experience, as well as having a reliable quality, close to HD level experience that doesn't have some of the glitches and artifacts and things that you sometimes have with streaming videos. Well, sometimes HD can be better than the DVD quality, since these are not HD videos that I have here. It is a widescreen though. But I like that they come with extra features like this, where you can open it and read about the story and the movie. Here's all the people sitting up in the audience watching the trial from up above in the balcony. Here's the guy that plays the sheriff. Famous actor, I forget his name now. Gregory Peck in the lead role. And here's his daughter, Scout. and her brother, who are the primaries in it. And interestingly, who is the guy that's in every movie ever made? Duvall, okay? In The Godfather, what's his first name? Why doesn't it show his name on here? Gregory Peck. Doesn't show him on the box. And he plays Boo, the scary guy the kids are afraid of in the haunted house next door. It doesn't even give him a credit on here. Anyway, it's Duvall. It's Robert Duvall, of course. What's wrong with me? You guys always have to tell me the names I'm forgetting, because I always forget. But this was one of Robert Duvall's very first roles. You see there. I think he's been in about 100 films. I know I've seen him in at least 25 or 30 films myself. Anyway, I like that you have inserts like this. This one has production notes that tell all about the making of the film and so forth. I won't go through a lot of reading of this one because we have a few other movies to get to, and I have limited time, being it's so late at night. Now I have 2 loud snaps to find and eliminate in my post-production editing, which I usually spend about 2 minutes on, so I'm not much of an editor. All I do is take a snippet off the front, which is where I do my audio check to make sure I'm hooked up, and the back. Look, I have a couple of bootleg films. Vanishing Point, that I recorded off of a DVD sometime, or something. I think I recorded it off of TV or something. Anyway, great cult film we'll talk about sometime, some other time. Let's just say, I talked about it on one of my car videos because it's a road trip film with the Dodge Challenger, made in the early 70s, and the new Challenger that you can buy today is a retro version made famous by that film, Vanishing Point. Well worth watching if you don't mind a film that's somewhat nihilistic. It's a great little cult film. Here's one with Clint Eastwood, the Eiger Sanction, where he's a mountain climber. That's a great, although it's typical Eastwood, it's quite a fun watch. Okay, not a 5-star film, but more like 3, but it's still a fun film to watch. All right. There's 2 great films that came out the same year, Westerns, that I think my all-time favorite Western, because of its realism and cinematography and so forth, might be Unforgiven, another Clint Eastwood film, which he directed and wrote and starred in and everything. I liked it because it portrayed the West and an aging gunfighter in a much less romanticized, much more realistic way, and yet still showed how important something like reputation is in scaring people at the end, when he became ruthless once again. after being calm and gentle earlier in the film. Anyway, there were two great films about Wyatt Earp. One was Tombstone, of course, and that was probably my favorite. But I think I talked about that one before. And so I'll talk a little bit about Wyatt Earp, the other film, made the same year. When was this made? Let's see. Does it tell here? Warner Brothers Pictures. Exciting extras. This is the other thing I like about DVDs is they give you all these extras that you can check out. You know, behind the scenes stuff, interviews with the director and the stars, things like that. It's a 2-disc special edition. And this is one of my favorite films, even though I would give Tombstone a little bit of an edge on the story. They both seek to be accurate as possible to the known story and history of Wyatt Earp, and they both play him as a somewhat complex character that isn't all good, like the old hero movies they made about him in the 50s and 60s, okay? This one says, a fascinating ride to a West where darkness and heroism mingle. The Kevin Costner plays, I think he's not quite cast correctly for this role, but he still does very well with it. He plays a Wyatt Earp with a definite dark side to him, which is true to the actual historical Wyatt Earp, since he had a dark side also. Kevin Costner plays the most famous lawman ever to stride the Wild West. Those stomach noises are protest against the chemo, sorry. In a gritty, complex portrayal hailed as a classic American performance, Costner plays the man who became a myth in an epic, action-filled saga, directed and co-written by Lawrence Kasdan. You know, I did like the girl better in this one who plays his girlfriend and became his wife. I like more the dark brunette type. That's maybe why I was attracted to Joanne. But anyway, exciting extras. Let's see what exciting extras. I don't think I've watched them on this, so I gotta check it out and see what they've got for extras if they describe it. Josie was the woman he married, and here's Josie. And the only known photographs of the real Josie look more like her than the one that was in Tombstone. But anyway, here's another photo of her. Don't tell Joanne that I looked and talked about it, because she goes crazy getting jealous if I ever even mention any female. Let's see. The guy that plays Doc Holliday does a great job on this film also. What's his name? Dennis Quaid, right? And then Gene Hackman plays his father, which is interesting because Gene Hackman also plays in the other Western I mentioned, Unforgiven, as a mean sort of bad sheriff. But anyway, what do they have on the extras? Do they tell me? Disc 1, part 1 shows all of the different scenes all listed. It's interesting how they list the scenes. They put a one-line sentence, short sentence, to describe the scene, like this one where it says, "It all ends now." I remember that scene. Kevin Costner walks into this raucous bar, or is he outside? Anyway, they're all shooting and screaming and throwing things. And I think he like fires his gun in the air and says, "It all ends now," because now he's the sheriff and he's going to bring, or he's the marshal. He's going to bring law and order to the lawless town of Tombstone, which was a wild mining town. Yeah. Anyway, Wyatt Earp goes further into his past and further into his future than Tombstone did. This goes back into when he was living back in, I think it was Georgia or someplace before he came out west. And he had bad experiences in life with a wife who died, and then he became an outlaw drunk and then escaped to the west to escape justice when he committed some crimes. Oh, here's another famous scene. "Wives come and go," he says. This is when one of Wyatt's brothers' wives, they're all together, and the wives are trying to get the brothers to go off on their own and leave Wyatt. And they say, why do you put all this, into your brother, and you don't care about your wife, right? One of them says something like that. And Wyatt turns to her and says, "Wives come and go, they die, things happen, but family and blood are family for life." Okay, I'm paraphrasing, because that's not the dialogue, but it's close. And that brother's wife says, "You're a cold man, Wyatt Earp." And she storms off in a huff. Anyway, Costner does a pretty good job as Wyatt. I highly recommend that if you like a good Western, especially if you want to check out the history of the gunfight at the OK Corral and the history of Wyatt Earp. Very good Western film, of course. Tombstone's great too. I think I talked about that one in a previous. How about a sci-fi film? One of my favorites of all time, of course, is the film AI, or Artificial Intelligence. Now, when you first watch this film, you may be tempted to say, "I don't know, that seems just a little bit hokey and contrived," but it's really a lot deeper if you think about the implications of it. Interestingly, Stanley Kubrick collaborated with Steven Spielberg on this film, but I believe that Stanley Kubrick died prior to the completion of AI, and so Spielberg had to continue and give it his own Spielberg-esque type ending. And but it's very well done. Now, if you watch it, or if you have watched it, tell me if you realized that one of the themes in the film was that human beings are so incredibly flawed that robot love becomes deeper and better and more loyal than human love. that was kind of one of the themes. It was about how deeply flawed we are as human beings. And that element has quite a bit of realism to it if you understand human nature. So Haley Joel Osment plays the robot child, and his adoptive parents adopt him because their own child is in a permanent coma. But just in case there's 3 of you that haven't seen the film out of the thousands out there that I might be speaking to, I won't do spoilers and tell you what happens when he comes. I will only say that as a storytelling exercise, of course the effects and things are good, but it's actually the story and the characters that make this a very powerful film. There are some minor comedic elements in it, especially the character played by Jude Law, who's another artificial intelligence being that kind of takes Haley Joel Osment under his wing partway through the film. This is a 2-disc special set. If I crack it open, once again I'll have a large sound I'll have to edit out. We'll do it way up here. Oh, that was pretty good. Not too loud. Disc 2 has special features. See there? One feature is I can rotate it like this. It's upside down. Let's get it right side up. There. I feel better now. Don't you? Okay. Let's see what the insert says about it. Pull that out. Can I pull that out? How do I do it? Oh, I see. I have to flip the disc over like this. Doesn't take too much intelligence or rocket science to figure that out, unless you're an engineer, and then it becomes a real difficult exercise, okay? Steven Spielberg film, extraordinary, it says. Scenes, they give the scenes also a whole list of scenes there. I'm gonna just do a little ear-to-ear tapping and whispering, because you guys told me that you want a long one in the future, so that's just a preview. Okay. In the early 1980s, director Stanley Kubrick purchased the rights. I'm losing my voice. It's about midnight, guys. Quite late, but that makes for a better sleep relaxation video because all is quiet on the Western Front. And it's that time when we get drowsy, right? I'm drowsy. And hopefully by now you are drowsy also. In the early 1980s, director Stanley Kubrick purchased the rights to noted science fiction writer Brian Aldo's story, Super Toys Last All Summer Long. There's a little artificial intelligence teddy bear in this, but I won't say more, other than to say he plays a key role later in the film. During Kubrick's 20-year odyssey, is that like alluding to 2001, A Space Odyssey, Kubrick's great original sci-fi film? During his 20-year odyssey to convert the story into AI, artificial intelligence, he consulted often with Steven Spielberg, who had struck up a friendship with the expatriate filmmaker. Kubrick showed Spielberg thousands of storyboards done over several years. I didn't know, I haven't read this before, by the way. I knew they collaborated, but I didn't realize how much was involved. This is interesting. Let's see, they talk about all the things they used, illustrators and special comic book illustrators and others. The illustrations would form the eventual look of the film's Rouge City. Rouge City is like a futuristic Las Vegas, Sin City kind of place where they have to go and get some highly difficult to find information from, I won't explain because you watch the film if you haven't seen it. Everything in a sense had to be designed, fabricated, and invented by Steven Spielberg. The filmmaker's focus lasered in on the creation of groundbreaking special effects and technical wizardry inherent in the design of a future that in many ways had never been attempted before in a motion picture. Advances in virtual set design would allow whole cities to be built. Anyway, Osment does a great job playing a robotic child who fixates on his real mother, or his human mother, I should say. He's a remarkable boy built from silicone and synthetics, it says here. I won't do any spoilers of the film beyond what I've mentioned, in case you haven't seen it. We'll put this one aside without making a big racket. What else do we have here? Of course, the great horror film, another film by Kubrick. I think I mentioned before he is in my top 3 of favorite directors. Mentioned that on another video and had a dialogue with some of you about him. Anyway, I know you've all seen this film, The Shining. Jack Nicholson as the crazed guy who comes under the possession or spell of a previous kind of demonic presence, sort of bad guy that murdered his family in the Overlook Hotel. It just does such a good job of setting up the creepiness of isolation to have this caretaker family up at this hotel on top of a high mountain just above the timberline, isolated there for the winter because deep snows close the road, the only road access. And then as Jack Nicholson starts slowly losing his mind and becomes more under the spell and control of the basically the ghosts who live there, and starts becoming angry with his wife and child. And his child is, by the way, psychic and can sense that certain things are wrong. So I don't want to say a whole lot about it because you've all seen it, other than it's one of my favorite classics in the horror genre of Stephen King's stories. Interestingly, Stephen King didn't like this version of The Shining, so he wanted to make his own. So he made the terrible mistake of making that 2-part made-for-TV movie called, maybe it was 3 parts, Anyway, it was many hours. And although it was interesting to see his version, his own version, Stephen King is a writer, not a director or movie maker. And that became clearly apparent because he just couldn't set the mood of his own story the way Stanley Kubrick did, or the character development, or the excellent direction, or the editing, none of the above. So, or the soundtrack, nothing was, really very good in Stephen King's version, but give credit where credit is due. He's the author of the story, and a good author at that, of that kind of genre. Almost last, but not least, if you'd like to see a World War II film that's as gritty and realistic as any you'll ever... I forgot to tell you, my mind bounces around here and there. In the Overlook Hotel, where these guys were, the creepy, giant, big resort hotel, it was filmed on location, not in the Colorado Rockies where it is set, the story is set. It was filmed on Mount Hood in Oregon. And I've never made it up there to see that resort hotel, but we will go there someday to check it out because I think it would be interesting to go to that filming location. And Mount Hood is not that far away from where we live. All right. If you want to see an incredibly realistic seagoing World War II film from the perspective of the German side, but it could just as easily have been from the perspective of the American side in some ways, get the film or rent it or stream it or something, Das Boot, which in German means the boat. But it's not just any boat. A naval warfare ship is called a ship, not a boat. This is a submarine story. Submarines are called a boat, okay? So, why, I don't know. Maybe because they submerge. But anyway, this film will truly give you the sensation that you went out on patrol to war down in a submarine. It gives you the real feel of what it was really like for the guys. Not kind of the glorified schmaltzy stuff that you used to see in the 1960s or 70s films. And this was done by a German director, Wolfgang Petersen. It's kind of an anti-war film in a way, because it kind of points out the futility. I won't, again, give you spoilers, but these guys get in several terrible situations, and if I recall correctly, it's something like 40,000 sailors went to war on U-boats in Germany in World War II, and only 10,000 came back alive. My numbers may be off, but I know 75% died at sea, being sunk otherwise, So this was not, in fact, they had a higher loss rate than anyone else. Now I see my battery's got 1 minute to go, so I'm going to have to save East of Eden for another time and say goodnight to everybody and just say, don't ASMR and drive. Take care, everyone. see this film if you want a good, super realistic. You might feel it's a little slow in places. It's done with subtitles or dubbed over. You can get a version either way. But great film. Fantastic how the director did all the scenes. You feel like you're there the whole time, right? So interactive menus. I have stuff on here, features too. All right, I have 1 minute, so take care, everyone. I hope you sleep well. Don't ASMR and drive. Until next time, bye-bye. I lied. There's still 1 minute to go. I can show you. It's got extra features inside also. Look there. Some great stuff about the film and how they did it. I'm going to keep going until this cuts off, which will be any moment now. Shows when they sunk an enemy ship, and they were very sad about it because they could hear it going down. You can hear everything underwater, so they could hear the ship breaking up. Even though they intended to sink it, it was still, poignant to them. They knew that they could end up in the same boat, no pun intended, and be sunk by a torpedo or a bomb or shelling or depth charges coming down. Right, so, yeah. When the hunters become the hunted, they say here. Very excellent. It's got the pings of the sonar and all that kind of thing. And this one is a very long version because it's the director's cut. It's way more than 2 hours. So do it when you have some time and a good supply of popcorn, all right? And it might not be a great film to watch with your girlfriend because she's going to say, I'm a little bored when there's no romance in this thing. But it's more of a guy film, I think. I watched it with Joanne, and I think she might have started snoozing about halfway through, but